Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sherrine Barrowes, and I'm a psychotherapist and a project manager for OPE. And today we will be discussing or having a conversation, I should say, with Celia Daniels. We're looking forward to that. So, this is One Place East in Conversation. And this is for our LGBTQ community. Celia, who's about to join us, is an Asian Indian non-op trans woman of color who's an entrepreneur, a musician, a photographer, a storyteller, an activist, and a blogger. And she is the founder and CEO of Rebekon Consulting LLC Limited. Thank you for joining us, Celia. And if you could come on and introduce yourself.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Isaac and Sherrine. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be in this call, especially early in the morning in LA, and it's
Yes.
such a beautiful day.
Mm,
And it's probably in the late or mid afternoon for you.
mhm,
Um, Thank you so much. I love to discuss with you and learn from each other, and it's such a pleasure and joy to be here.
mm. Thank you for
You're
being.
yeah, you're our first international guest, so we
Mhm.
really do appreciate
Yay.
it.
And I wish we could share the view that it's a lovely day in the UK, but not particularly. But
Oh,
we will gain some sunshine from you.
Yes, yeah, from this
I
conversation.
will.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, Celia, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself before we go into, the conversation.
Absolutely.
Mm,
I'm a management consultant with 25 years of experience working with healthcare and Fortune 100 companies, especially in healthcare, media, and life sciences clients in US and also in India. I'm a parent of a 22-year-old child, daughter, and also I'm married to a cisgender woman for 25
mm,
years. This April will be 25 years in our marriage. So I'm
mhm,
really excited about that.
mhm,
I'm an, when you look at the way in which the world sees you, and always been known as, Celia is trans and Celia is a non trans woman, and that's the way the world always looks at me. But being trans is not my agenda. Being a wonderful human being is my agenda in life. And that's what I always tell is I have intersectional identities. I'm an Asian, I'm an immigrant in this country, and I'm a parent, I'm a blogger, as you mentioned earlier. I have a lot of wonderful intersectional identities. I had 8 cats at one point in time.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, I love to talk about all that, but many times when I'm in a particular setting or in a conversation, just in a bus or in an aeroplane, the conversation always comes to, you're trans, what do you do? What's your identity? And sometimes it gets really tiring in that kind of a setting. So we always feel like we want to be identified in the way we are and
mhm,
not just talk about some of our identity in spaces where I can have a conversation about children, raising children, or talk about, just some beautiful hiking spots in New Zealand, which I did, and snorkeling, which I did. So there
mhm,
are so many things, but unfortunately, the world always looks at us as a trans person. And
Mm.
we're going to change that. These conversations are going to change that. So I'm excited about this conversation. And that's a little bit about me. We'll be talking in length during our conversation today. But thank you.
It's I'm gonna jump into one of the questions that you've brought up about people should be people. Like for me, with a disability, I'm still just a person, but people always label me as someone in a wheelchair. So,
mhm,
the question I want to ask is, do you think labels like trans and disability are bringing us closer as a society, or doing the opposite?
mhm,
It's an introduction to identifying with a community, basically, because the world is always stereotyping and putting us in these boxes, Asian, Indian, immigrant. And
mhm,
when they look at folks like yourself or folks like me, they always want to put us in these boxes.
Mm.
And that's the way the world is identifying. But when they look at it with a zoom lens and they go much more closer into who Isaac is, then they see that you are such an exciting person. You have done so many wonderful things, which people sometimes later come to know. And for me, that's the same way. Maybe identifying as trans, and when they first look at me in 5 seconds, they know I'm trans. But once you get to know I'm trans, then what are the conversations after that? It's probably an introduction saying, "Hey, my name is Celia. I'm from this company, or I go by this pronouns. I'm now. What is the next after that? What are we going to talk about? Is what is important. Sometimes the labels really help in connecting with certain
Mm.
communities, but that's not the label I always carry. It's one of the labels I carry. Being trans is one of the labels that I carry. That's how I look at it. But it's not the most essential labels that we are branded with.
Mm.
I think that's quite interesting in terms of, because obviously there are always for and against arguments in terms of labeling. There are some people who don't want to be in a box, and others, you need it to unite you in terms of other communities. And I'm from mixed heritage. My father is Indian. I come from the West Indies. And so for me, fitting in a box has been a very difficult thing. And so I do understand what you mean in terms of kind of creating some sort of identity and some sort of commonality with certain
Mm.
individuals by having that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
the funny conversation I always have is whenever they know that I'm Indian, they talk about Indian food, which is okay. But then they ask me, "So, what's your favorite Indian food?" And I said, "I like kebabs, and I like Mediterranean kebabs, and Afghan kebabs are my favorite."
Mm.
And that's not even Indian food. And they say, "Yeah, exactly." Because sometimes being an Indian doesn't mean that we are all Indian. But I love all kinds of cuisines, and
Mm.
I kind of change the conversation, and then I even say that I like steak, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, you're more American than I thought." It's funny sometimes, but it leads to a conversation. You can't help
Yes.
it. It just leads to a conversation, and then they see the whole human being, the whole package, and that's when
Mhm.
the conversations change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once we start speaking with each other, that's when we really start to know about each other, and why
Yeah,
conversations like these are so important.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Absolutely. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was, what was your experience, going through the journey and actually kind of saying, okay, I'm trans? What was that experience like for you?
I think this is the first time someone has asked me this question. It's
Oh.
always about, we know you're trans. Now tell us what's happening. I was in denial for a very long time, because growing up in India, I knew I was trans when I was 4 years old, but it was not the word trans. I knew it was different when I was.
Mhm.
Mm.
This was in early 70s in India. You can imagine the country was just evolving. It was full of patriarchy. Men always had an upper hand. And
Mm.
being born as a boy, it was a privilege. It was a privilege. I enjoyed this privilege more than my cousin sisters. Though I wore their skirts and I was running around the house like a little girl,
Mhm.
my mom thought it was cute. But after a while, she looked at the colonial constructs created by the British government in India, which was so binary.
Mhm.
And she said, I don't think you should be wearing those clothes anymore. And she told me that probably when I was 6 or 7 years old. Only
Mhm.
then the gender hit me as to, oh, I cannot be both. I cannot be a girl and a boy, and I have to
Mhm.
pick one. The constructs of gender and certain identities just come when you know about it at an early age, but sometimes you go into the closet because of the societal issues that are
Mm.
around. You don't want to come out, and that's what happened to me. I was in
Mhm.
the closet for a very long time. So I talk about my life in 5 dimensions. I dreamt of being a girl. I started doubting that this is probably a phase. And even my parents told me this is a kind of phase. You need to get over it.
Mhm.
I believed it because my mom was a nurse. And then I went into a part where I started living in doubting myself and also went into denial.
Mm.
Although I faced a lot of discrimination coming out in India when I was in my ninth grade, probably at 10 or 11 years old, I was publicly humiliated.
Wow.
It was so traumatic for me. And then a trigger warning for people in the call, I tried committing suicide twice, and
Mm.
also went into self-harm. So it was a difficult journey. When I saw all the challenges that I was going through, I
Mm.
felt like I don't want this kind of life. This is not me.
Mm.
So I went into this denial phase, and I even thought marrying a cisgender woman would take away all my femininity. And I was always attracted to women. I was never attracted to men, and that was another confusion because you in your we were always I was mixing up both sexual orientation and gender identity together, and that caused based on whom I was attracted to, I was confused. So I
Mm.
knew that I was not attracted to men, so I thought I'm not gay, but why am I wanting to be gay? I didn't understand the terminology that was as trans those days. I also saw the Hijra community in India. They were getting beaten in the train
Mm.
traveling, and I felt like I always said this: I want to be you. I am you, but I don't. I mean, I am you, but I don't want to be you. I don't
Mm.
want to be beaten in the station, and that's how I felt growing up in India. I went into this denial stage. I came out to my wife after we got married. I had a daughter at the time. She was 2 years old.
Mm.
My wife said, this is a fetish. You can change. I've seen men who are fetish. They have this fetish of being a woman, and I
Mm.
believed her. I truly believed her, and I always felt like I'm a successful businessman, and why do I need to mess up my life coming out? I'm very successful right now. So I went into hiding. I started discovering myself. And that's the time I sat in Colorado in a mountain and I started crying because I had to accept the fact that I'm trans.
Mm.
Almost 45 years.
Mm.
Wow.
It was really hard for me to accept. That was the first personal transition that I would call. Is
Mm.
I had to accept that I'm trans. And only then and after that, everything changed. Till then, I was in denial. I was just pushing it away because I enjoyed all the privilege. I was afraid of coming out.
Mm.
Want my family to leave me. I didn't want my boss to fire me from the company where I was the senior executive.
Mm.
I had so many fear in me, but when I started accepting that I'm different, I'm born differently because of education, I started studying about why people are different and why are they like me. That changed my perspective. And
Mm.
that was the time I actually came out to myself and I said, you know what? This is who I am. I cannot change it. If I'm
Mm.
born this way, I cannot question that.
Mm.
I need to learn to be a different person, have a different life, and also advocate for people like me. That was a
Mm.
change. That
Mm.
was a big life change in my life.
That's great. Um, Go ahead, Isaac.
No, I was just gonna say such a powerful story, and the ideology of acceptance um,
Mm.
that people have to do within themselves to then make that kind of like that awakening moment that okay, this is me, and now I'm going to work with it, and I'm
Mm.
gonna use it to my advantage, and I'm gonna. I see on your like LinkedIn how you're using it to empower others.
Mm.
It's very inspiring, and whenever I see your post, it does put a smile on my face that yeah, you're really changing the narrative,
Mm.
um, and that you're being a huge advocate to many people who may not have a voice. So for me personally, yeah, thank you for all you're doing. Really, it's great.
Mm.
Thank you, Isaac. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
I thought that was a very powerful story. And it's amazing that you said no one has actually asked you about that journey. They were just, but that journey is such a pivotal thing, having to go through, the difficulties that the feeling not accepted, and firstly accepting yourself before others would really accept you. Yeah, very powerful. Very powerful indeed. Hmm.
Absolutely. I think a
And
lot of time, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No.
Now, a lot of times we forget our where we came from. I don't want to live in the past, but I want to
Mm,
Mm,
change the future with my past experience. And that's why I
mm,
say that experiences like ours are much more powerful than a theoretical platform where we talk about and these are spaces where our experiences have to be told.
mm-hmm,
And that's why I speak up on LinkedIn because a lot of times people don't like what I post. Recently I posted something and everyone was like, "This is unscientific. This doesn't happen." But I always believe that it's not that it's unscientific. The humanize. I always say that humanize what we are going through. Don't politicize. And as a trans person, humanize our issues. As a person
mm-hmm,
with disabilities, humanize our issues. Don't politicize it. And that's
mm-hmm,
the problem that I see in the world today.
mm-hmm,
Any 280 anti-trans bills in 2022 is appalling to me.
mm,
Basically telling that you don't exist. We're going to erase you from healthcare, from school board education, from
mm-hmm,
workplace discrimination. We can discriminate you, and also being away from all the community related activities. Wherever you go, people always look at you with a disgusting look on their face, like, "Oh my God, you're here too." That's
mm-hmm,
what we have to change.
mm-hmm,
Cause yeah, I saw you posted this week about the ban in Florida House,
Mm.
would ban all classroom discussions for LGBT people. Um, and it's like, are we going backwards as a society? Like we've got so far, and then they do that, and it's like now we're taking steps backwards, and I can't understand. I don't
You're
understand.
right. Yeah, you're right, Isaac. A lot of times, what happens is I see the government changing in US too. As soon as the Democrats come, the LGBTQ community is given a little bit of room to breathe. You feel like you're under the water, you're coming out, and then the governments keep on changing. And I've seen that in the past 25 years in US, living in this country. And to me, it's like a non-ending issue. How long will this go on? Why aren't people just letting us survive?
Mm,
Like the black community, we had so much of issues, and after almost like 265 years of segregation and all kinds of a lot of issues that had gone through, and now people are slowly beginning to accept. And you had to cost a life for that. How many lives have they be lost
yeah.
for us to establish that?
mm-hmm,
And I don't know, I don't want that because just in last year, 50 trans people and 50 trans and gender variant folks were murdered in US and the US territories. So,
mm-hmm,
lives are being murdered. People don't think about it. They don't treat us as human beings, so it's always like you want to pass. You
mm-hmm,
pass like a woman. And always people come and tell me, Celia, you pass like a woman. I say, I cannot be a woman. I respect women. My mom was a woman. My wife is a woman. I respect them. I'm not a woman. I'm a trans woman.
Mm,
I
mm,
don't want to pass as a woman. I want to establish. I want to present. I want to make a change as a trans woman. And that's what I am called to do. That's
mm-hmm,
my destiny. And the states are all going back because they are politicizing these issues. They know if you really look at a person in the eye, if you look at a pastor in his eye and tell him that, do you think you really hate me? He's going to say, no, I don't hate you, but you chose a wrong lifestyle. And that's why it is wrong.
mm-hmm,
It's not a lifestyle we choose. It's
mm-hmm,
XY or XX chromosomes. It's 23 pairs of chromosomes, and every human being is different by your thumbprint.
mm,
When we are all different on this planet and we have our own purpose on this planet, why aren't we agreeing upon each other? And why do we have these laws saying that I am better than you and you
mm-hmm,
don't deserve this education? We don't want you to learn about the black oppression. We don't want you to learn about the Jewish Holocaust. We don't want you to learn about LGBTQ community because it's so traumatic to my child. You know what? Your child is okay. The problem is you.
mm.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. It's always down to the
Absolutely.
parents.
Exactly.
And I think it's important for a child to know difference from very young,
Yeah.
because I think that's the problem. We are socialized
Mm.
to fit in this box that, someone at some point felt that's where we all belong. And it's almost to them a surprise that we don't fit in that box. And it is okay to have difference. And the world would be such a different place if we were all the same, pretty much robots, really, you
Yeah.
know? Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be right. Gosh.
You know, we couldn't do another I. What about if you had several Isaacs in the
Oh,
world?
oh no, you don't want that.
Yeah.
You do not want that.
Yeah.
Or maybe if we did have several Isaacs, there would be change in the world. But anyway,
Mhm. Yes, you know.
yeah,
Definitely, the need for speed. I see the need for speed.
yes.
Yeah. So, Celia, please tell me if you were to give any advice to someone who is, kind of struggling with this, what would you say? What would your advice be to them?
If you're born in the LGBTQ community,
Mm-hmm.
the issues are different with the LG and B, and for
Mm-hmm.
the T and
Mm-hmm.
the folks who identify as trans, gender variant, and intersex community,
Mm-hmm.
there is always a hope for us to change the world. You know, you may not see it in your lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
but what we are doing today will always will leave a legacy for the younger generation,
Mm-hmm.
people like us. And that's what I always tell my daughter, that it took 17 years for my wife to accept me. You know, it took a while for her because she married this cisgender man. That's what she thought, who would change and be the wonderful husband. But now she's been more than loving. And she said, I love you more today because I see you,
Mm,
like in Avatar, they say, really see you, not
Mm-hmm.
just this man who's my husband, but this
Mm-hmm.
human being who's so wonderful. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we need to create, such good leaders in our community. People who have intersectional identities have to be good leaders, and they are the good leaders in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of folks just, it's not that I talk about bathroom to boardroom, right? If we
Mm-hmm.
make a change in an organization, in your workplace, in any place that you are in,
Mm-hmm.
your life and visibility is a great advocacy for who you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you may not see what you're doing today, and you may be tired of
mm,
just advocating for yourself and just speaking up, and people always coming and asking you this question, Celia, how is it to be trans? And I sometimes feel tired answering that question.
Mm-hmm.
So I just answer with grace, because if I don't do that, if I say, go read it on internet, I have that posting, go read about me. I feel so tempted to say, just go and read about it. Me, I can't explain this to you, but I feel like it's not the right thing to do.
mm,
We need to educate even one person, if we can educate in our lives, and one person is an advocate for me,
Mm-hmm.
an ally for us, and that is going to change. So
Mm-hmm.
here's why, the word ally, I love to put it this way. This might be easy for the audience to grasp the word allies, ALLIES. A is acknowledge your privilege that you can be an advocate for us. L is listen to our community. Another L is learn to unlearn things that you've learned. And I is instigate or initiate tough conversations and decisions in places where you are. E is to educate yourself and
Mm-hmm.
educate people around you. And S, be supportive by being involved, by being a part of the community. It's not about just sitting on social media, but just go out there during a Transgender Day of Remembrance and just look at things around you and be supportive to people. And that's the only way we can change
Mm-hmm.
the community. And that's what we want all the people listening to the call who are trans and gender variant and intersex community, that there is hope. If I had lost my hope when I was probably in my teens and taken my life away, I would not have come this far to even
Mm-hmm.
mm,
speak in this podcast, because
Mm-hmm.
To me, that makes such a difference. Maybe
Mhm.
one person is listening to this podcast when it's published. To me, that makes a huge difference because that
Mhm.
one person can be a great influence and an advocate for our community.
Mhm.
Never quit, never. For 2022, I put a little blob on my whiteboard here in my office. It says, never give up.
Mm.
Mhm.
It's a simple word, but for people like us, you want to give up. You're going somewhere and they keep on, and workplace, I had discrimination. I almost thought of giving up. I raised it to a HR. I had spoken to the HR, and they all did a lot of investigation. And I felt like after a point, they're not going to listen to my voice because I'm a trans person. Why would they listen to me?
Mhm.
$26 billion organization that I was complaining about. And I thought, they're not going to listen to me.
Mhm.
I almost just gave up. And just a week before, they called and said, Celia, we are going to make sure that we are onboarding you as a first gender non-binary person in our company. We have never done for the past 30 years.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's the story we need to tell these organizations, that we want to be persistent and keep on pushing. Never give up. Even though you fall, get up and stand and keep moving. That
Mhm.
is what we can relate to.
Mhm.
Because if you had given up,
Mhm.
and the children who are looking at these podcasts and who are watching this podcast will think that, oh, it's not, there is no hope for me.
Mhm.
That's why I tell people in India, when I speak to the audience in India, I tell them that I am an hijra, but I say American hijra. Because it's so funny. They call me an American hijra in India, actually. When I went back, they said, you are, you are like a hijra, but you're from America. I said,
Mhm.
hijras are not from America, they're from India. And it's just another way, it's just a community.
Mhm.
We are very
Mhm.
traditional, but the transgender community in India has not seen successful entrepreneurs. They've always seen the blue collar trans people.
Mhm.
They've
Mm.
seen trans people who are burnt being sex workers, singing in
Mhm.
weddings, performing in the streets, begging in
Mhm.
the streets. We can
Mhm.
change it.
Mhm.
That's what we need to give them hope, that there
Mhm.
are people like Celia today
Mhm.
who
Mm.
can change your future. It's not
Mhm.
because you're following me, because you're going to follow your own dreams and you will be successful today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never give up. And
Indeed.
there's proof in the pudding of what you can
Mhm.
do if you don't give up.
Mhm.
You know,
Exactly.
yeah, use what you have and never give up. Yeah,
Indeed.
you've really explained it well. And I also, with the work that I do, I'm always leading towards inspiring that one person, because I feel if I inspire that one person, they can inspire the next person.
Mhm.
Um, because I think it's too much pressure to think, oh, I want to inspire a million people, but that one person is most powerful,
Mhm.
and it's changed their life to think differently or feel like they can be the best version of themselves. So, I think that's something that a lot of people should do. Concentrate on that one to really make the difference.
Mhm.
Yeah, you rightly said. Because they feel like, this is a burden on my shoulders and I don't know if I can do it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I've spoken to a lot of my friends who are trans and they feel like, Celia, you know what? I'm done advocating for myself. I'm just going to go and do my own life, which is fine. Um, but I always tell them that you don't have to advocate at all. Just if you enter the store as a trans person and show that confidence and that
Hmm.
compassion, that love, and a grace
Mhm.
to people who don't understand us, that is advocacy.
Mhm.
Advocacy is not pulling up a microphone and yelling in on the streets.
Mhm.
I've done too, but that's not you don't have to do that kind of
Hmm.
advocacy. Just being who you are. Sometimes we advocate for ourselves.
Mhm.
Like Sherrine, if you are going to a grocery store, someone would come and say, "Hey, you look different. You don't belong to the Caucasian side. What? Tell me something about yourself." Or they will always ask these questions. So it's
Mhm.
interesting when people ask us these questions to bring those conversations. And uh,
Mhm.
I've even had issues like in US before. A couple of years back, people have come to me and said, go back to your country. You don't belong here.
Mm,
Not because I'm trans, but because I'm brown and I'm an immigrant.
Mm.
mm,
Sometimes you go through civil rights issues too. So, and
mm,
that's why for me, it's not just other people being my ally, but it's also me being an ally to them. I
mm,
asked my friend
Yeah.
during George Floyd's murder, I asked my friend who is trans and black trans man. I asked him as Lucky, what can I do to be an advocate for the black community? And he said, Celia, I've known you for many years, and I know you're such a compassionate advocate, but stand in the gaps where we are not there. Be my mouthpiece while I'm not there. And there may be spaces where I cannot be there, and that's where you come in and
mm,
speak. So I've started learning about issues that are more human rights related. I
mm,
started out as a transgender advocate, advocating by myself, and I ended up as a gun control advocate. Immigration, I fought for immigration. I stood for the Native American issue that was there in Standing Rock. I fought for the Indian anti-Asian issues.
mm,
I also stood for the of course Black Lives Matters, and so many uh, people's causes, like children when they're locked in cages in during the immigration. We just went there and stood and started opposing all that in front of the
mm,
congresswoman's office here in where the community that I live. I'm a political activist also. The
Mm.
reason I'm the vice president of Stonewall Democrats. I didn't choose to. You don't wake up and one day think that, okay, I think I'm going to be a Democrat. No, you don't do that. Or it just comes naturally.
mm,
When my daughter lost her friend in a gun violence here,
Gosh.
I automatically started, my heart went out and I started standing for these rights. So I also educate the trans community to be an advocate for other communities.
Mm.
That's something we don't see today. It's always like, oh, we are the minorities and you need to be considerate about us. Of course, I know you acknowledge your privilege, but it's also that sometimes when we can be in those gaps, we can be in those spaces to talk about something. Like my brother, he's an advocate for the mental health community, and he does a lot for the community. Though his children, when he was talking about his children's learning disability and how he's been an advocate, he's changing a lot of families today in Silicon Valley.
mm,
Um, so to me, those are important. So I started studying about mental health. Now I'm
Mm.
speaking to doctors, doctors association. I'm training nurses today on. I
mm,
had like two classes, like 2 hours training
mm,
nurses about the LGBTQ health. And these are spaces where sometimes you can make a change.
mhm,
Because when I told my doctor I'm going through gender dysphoria, my doctor didn't understand. He was like, "What is gender dysphoria? Can you tell me? Is it depression? Is it anxiety? What can I do? What medication can I do? Whom can I refer
mm,
you to?" And I said, "Hey, doc, I just want you to know." And I had to tell him my story.
Mm.
Listening to my story, and you know what he wrote? He wrote in that pad after all that, saying that this person has suicidal ideation, so we need to make sure this person is, we are taking care of this person. I've got a lot of clinical trials coming in asking me to, depression.
mm,
Funny because sometimes doctors don't understand these terminologies, so you're
Yeah.
educating the medical
mm,
community, and only we can do it in a much effective way so that they understand that gender dysphoria is relating to depression. It can lead to suicidal ideation, but it can be treated too. I am doing much better. My gender
mm,
dysphoria was at a very high stage where I was like, I hated who I was, but it's sometimes the education awareness is so
mm,
important in the community. We need to speak up, keep on educating, and we may be so tired in doing it, but I always feel like, you know what, I'm if I can speak to one person today,
mm,
Mm.
and it's like saying this, I wanted to, I always say this as you can educate people who are ignorant, but you cannot educate people who are arrogant.
absolutely. Mm,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that actually brings me on nicely to the next question, which is, you've highlighted some of the negative ways in which it has impacted your mental health. And I wonder if you could highlight some of the positive ways as well in which it has impacted your mental
Mm.
health.
Absolutely. During COVID-19, a lot of the folks within the LGBTQ community, they had to go back and into the house because a lot of times the families reject them or they don't
Mm.
agree with them, but they tolerate you and you're in the household. So you get a chance to go to school, come back. You had a lot more interaction with other people in the community, like going to a support group. During COVID-19, all those doors were closed. So they had to just live in that closed doors with
Mm.
transphobic parents or homophobic parents. So a lot of people in the community, they were struggling, and the only solace they had was on the phones. They could talk to people. And I was going through a stage in my life where I knew my wife was accepting, but I still loved her so much that I didn't want her to leave me.
Mm.
Um, and it was very difficult, and I was explaining to her what I was going through, and she didn't understand. She thought, you're doing a lot of things. I know you get it. I get it, but I still have this little bit of an inhibition about the fact that you're trans, and she always had that a little bit. But
Mm.
COVID brought us together. Actually, we went for hiking together. We had long walks in the evening, and every time I go for a walk, I'll talk about trans issues. And I asked her, "Am I speaking too many issues about trans community? Is that okay?" And she said, "You know what? You're teaching me, and I'm willing to learn." So
Mm.
I found that my wife was more accepting, and she started learning a lot about trans folks. In fact, she after I wrote a policy for a company, she's very good in proofreading. I sent the entire 30-page document to her, and I said, "Proofread this document for me," and she proofread the whole thing. And she was able to understand the issues that trans people are going through by reading a policy document.
Mm.
And now I don't even have to tell her anything. And whenever I talk about trans, she will just talk from her experience just by seeing her husband, going through this. And I always feel like I tell my daughter, call me dad, don't call me another mother because you have a beautiful mother.
Mm.
I don't want to be a mother, I want to be a dad. People don't understand. How can trans men have children? How can you be this? We don't follow the binaries. This is not scientific. And many times people have told me that, why don't they call you mom? And I said, no, I don't want to because it's my choice. Sometimes we have to define things for the community, or the community will define things for us. So I always feel like I need to start my own thing. And when I said that I want my daughter to call me dad, and she got really close to me because she thought that she's going to lose her dad. My daughter loves me a
Mm.
lot. I We play together. We have so many things in common. In fact, she's one of the Democrat delegates, young Democrat delegates for the state of California. And it's all the influence that she saw me getting involved in, I wouldn't say politics, but in making a change in our community. So the positive things that has come out is my family is more accepting to me. My wife is being such an advocate. And I
Mm.
told her, being in the South Asian community, what do you think? People will always have this, oh, that person became a girl. And, this is such a gossip within the South Asian community because it's all status related. So when I was asking my wife, are you okay with that? People may speak ill about us. Are you okay with it? And then she said, you know what? I really don't care. You matter to me more than them. So yes, family acceptance was a great positive thing that happened, which really helped me with my mental health.
Mm.
So I can say that a lot of times when you are in a closed environment, when you're going to the office, when you're going to a grocery store, when you're going to a church or just a gathering, just a support meeting, if when you have a good accepting community and they understand you,
Mm.
then that helps with your mental health. Helps a lot with your mental health, and talking to somebody and sharing those stories and your personal challenges will help with mental health, and it's helped me a lot. So I started calling my friends and kept on asking, how are you doing? And they'll say, oh, don't tell me about it, I'm going through I have a I have a stepfather who is very transphobic. Um, so they talk about it, and I talk to them. Then I sometimes talk about. I give them pointers as to watch a movie. Go watch Avengers. You like Avengers. Why don't you watch that?
Mm,
Why don't you play video games or something? Keep your mind busy
Hmm.
in a closed environment. So
mm,
a lot of them, a lot of times, I think. And I go out, I take my car, drive outside, sit in the beach, and just stare at the water.
mm,
I feel so calm. I feel so sometimes blessed living in California. Even when I was in India, my house was next to the beach. So I always loved beach, and it's like a therapy for me.
mm,
You just sit there, and sometimes I just speak to myself, or probably I'm
Hmm.
speaking to the universe or God.
Yeah.
But
mm,
it always helps me to let it out. And my my I would say my gender dysphoria, my mental health has been much, 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 much better.
That's good.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
I just want to comment on how wonderful your wife is, and supporting you through all of it, and still being with you, because you hear stories of people transitioning, or there's something which is considered different, and then they just end up leaving. But
mm,
she's someone that we should all be like a figure that we should all follow, like
mm,
with that support to
mhm,
have on someone, whatever they may be going through. You
mhm,
should always be there to support them.
mhm.
So no, yeah, I like your wife a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously does.
Yeah. And she's still shy, she's still not at a point where she wants to be in the
Mm,
media. I've
Mhm,
asked her, "Do you want to come to the support group?" And she said, "No, I'll just be behind your back and support you, but I
mm,
really don't want to be." I mean, she's her nature is that way. She's not
mhm,
the flamboyant kind who would just jump on front of a camera and talk.
yes.
She loves singing though. She loves,
mhm,
so we both
mm,
sing quite often. And one of the things that really helped me is singing with her. And we harmonize. We sing all kinds of songs. I play the acoustic guitar. I compose music, and I've also made some music about trans oppression. I
mhm,
write songs. I've written a lot of songs. I compose music and I record them as well. I love sound engineering. That's another thing which I didn't mention. So I have a small studio at home. I record these songs, and I can send a link that you can share. I
mhm,
have
Yeah,
made a
that'll be
song
great.
about. So she's very. That's one thing that I think we all miss out. Sometimes we don't talk about the people who are really there to support you.
mhm,
Mm,
And whenever they say, Celia, you're such a great person, I'll say that every great person has someone behind them
mm,
who are trying to help them, push them. And many
mhm,
times I have also given up. I said, I'm so tired. I don't want to go for this meeting today. And she'll say, I think you should go. I can do something. Don't worry about me. I'm just going to go meet my friend. I'll go for a walk. But why don't you go and meet this person? Because it's going to make a difference in their lives.
mhm.
Sometimes she is so supportive that sometimes she pushes me even to do things like, go speak to them, go do something.
no, it's
I will
great.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll do that. And yeah, of course, my daughter is like, she's in the other extreme. She's so proud of me. She started telling her friends,
Mm,
"My dad is gender non-binary. My dad is trans." They're like, "Oh my God, I didn't think about it."
Mhm,
Younger generation, they just accept people when they
yeah, they do.
mhm,
adults are so open and so vulnerable. They
mhm,
always want to see people with vulnerability. That's where I
mhm,
see the leadership there. Not being successful is not they always heard their stories about their parents always telling them that you have to read, you'll be successful, you'll be great, you'll make a lot of money.
mhm, mhm,
um, and I also took Sunday school in my church for 10 years,
Mm,
um,
mhm,
for the youth. And all I told them was my vulnerable stories. Now the kids have all moved out, they're in college, some of them have got jobs. And I was just chatting with one of the girls and my daughter last Sunday, and she
mhm,
said, one thing that made a big difference for me is to hear your stories that were funny, you did lots of things which are interesting, like naughty things, like
mhm,
climbing a tree or doing something which was fun. But you also said things which were so vulnerable, which made a big difference, because you didn't talk about success. You always talked about failures and how to come out of it, and we could relate to that as children.
mhm,
As teens, we
mhm,
could relate to it because we are so tired of parents telling, do that. You have to be successful. Look at that person. They have done that course and they're really great. So I think, to me, servant leadership and
Mhm.
vulnerability is where leadership is. It is, that's what the younger generation need to see.
Mm,
Um,
Mhm.
so when they see how we are struggling with our challenges that we have, and still
Mhm.
able to speak up, and these are stories. This podcast, this webcast, these are stories the younger generation need to see.
mm,
These are not. These are like the. It's not like the Bezos or like Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, or even Bill Gates of the world. But these stories are so powerful because they can relate to it.
mm.
They will know that, oh, if I can be friendly to my trans friend, I always avoided this person, but now I'm going to go and say, do you want to get a coffee with me?
Mhm.
I do that. And if
Mhm.
we have changed that,
Mhm.
I think, all our time, this 1 hour we spent on the podcast is worth it.
Yes, yes,
It
yeah, very much so.
is.
Yeah.
One of the things I actually appreciate you expressing is really about support and having a support network and how sometimes important that is, because having to do this alone can be kind of scary, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding your tribe, finding people who understand you and actually is able to support you is a major thing, major thing.
You're absolutely right. Sometimes in our vulnerability and our challenges, we may lose friends also,
Mm,
but we always gain new friends. I
mm,
have lost some of my old friends that I've been with for 30 years or more than 30 years because they didn't agree with me. They
Mm-hmm.
said, you chose this lifestyle and I don't agree with it.
mm,
I'm like, even before I knew you, since I was 4 years old, I didn't choose this lifestyle. This is who I am. If you're not able to
mm,
accept me, then I think I leave you there. But and I looked at people who just accepted me for who I am. I didn't have to
mm,
explain anything. They
Mm.
said, Celia, I see you and I want to be your ally. What can I do? No
mm,
questions asked. And I said, you know what? These are my people.
mm,
Yeah,
Surround yourself with positive people.
mm,
Have a positive influence in your life
mm.
because the energy goes from both sides. From
yeah,
us to them, and they also see that energy in us,
Yeah,
and that's what motivates us to keep going.
absolutely.
right.
Mm.
So one last question. So it's LGBTQ plus month. How do you celebrate this month?
I always say two things: voice and visibility.
Mm.
Just because some of them have the voice to talk about it, share one incident in their lives where they had a challenge and a positive note. I've seen a lot of LGBTQ stories and even LGBTQ movies always ending in a tragedy. The trans person gets killed all the time.
Gosh.
And there was a movie director who came to me and said, Celia, I've written a story about a gender fluid trans person who's coming out. And
Mm.
yeah, of course, in the end, this person gets killed.
Mm.
I read the script and I said, I don't agree. This is not a positive portrayal of trans community. That
Mm,
Mm.
there is a life, and this person is a school teacher, and they're coming out. It's a movie called Georgia. It's a webcast. It's coming out. Even so, I influenced the person to change the script,
okay.
Mm.
and he changed the ending of the story. And he changed the ending where this person comes out as trans in the family, and the wife is accepting, but they
Mhm.
didn't kill that person. So
Mm.
sometimes we can change. Uh,
Mm.
we can change the community, and if we give up quickly, we can change the narratives in the media today.
Mm.
Mm,
The media has a lot of influence over this, and trans people were always portrayed as that. Gay folks are always portrayed as flamboyant, and they're
Mm.
always designers and very clean and meticulous. No, actually, not really.
mm, mm,
I have gay friends who are they don't portray themselves that way. I
Mm.
don't have gay friends that I don't even know that they're gay because they are so straight and sometimes the way they behave.
Mhm.
And But I feel like it's important for us to always go back to our own heritage across the world. Like for me, of course, Sylvia Rivera and um, The fight when they had in the Stonewall is very important for me. But at the same time, that's not my history. As an Asian Indian, my
Mm,
history comes from 7,000 years um, of gender fluidity in India.
mm,
mm,
And it was much before that. It was not just the 1960s, much, much before that.
mm,
I always look back to the history of the world and say that, there are people who are different and in different cultures across the world, like Native American, they have five genders.
mm,
In Indian, we're all changing and we're changing across the world. The change that we create in UK or US or India has to be
mm,
across the world.
mm,
And that's how I look at it. And I always say I'm a citizen of the world and not a citizen of America. Because to me, that is important. As being
mm,
born and brought up in an South Asian community, for me, that is important.
mm,
Those stories have to be told during the LGBTQ month, where you have one story.
mm,
You have one story that you can tell about your culture. You
mm,
can speak up about what you faced and how you changed things around your community, your house.
mm,
A picture with your parents and saying that my parents are accepting, they are so supportive.
mm,
I saw one picture on LinkedIn of a person who is gender fluid, and I was so excited because now in India, parents are accepting.
mm,
That's what makes a big change. And when parents see that people like me, who was born and raised in India, have gone across the world and
mm,
stayed successful and still want to change the world in India, then they feel like, wow, who is this person? I want to know what she did. How did she manage? And that's why I've got a lot of questions from people in India. They want me to speak about it.
mm,
mm.
Tell them that, tell your own story.
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Your own story. Find your
Mm,
story. You have a story. Celia has a story. Isaac has a story. You all have a story. So
mm,
tell. Let's tell those stories, the struggles
mm,
that we had, within the LGBTQ community, and that is the stories that people need to hear.
mm,
Not all the time about Stonewall. Yeah, I get it. But even before Stonewall, there was so much riots going on in San Francisco.
mm,
Those stories are not told. Of course,
Mm,
for me, it's not that I want to take away the focus on what happened in Stonewall. That's so important. But we have our own story. My Stonewall was the change that happened in my life was 2011 when I went for the Transgender Day of Remembrance. I stood there and I looked at all the trans people who were murdered brutally. And there were 27 or 25 trans people who were murdered that year. And I stood
mm,
there and I cried. And I didn't know anybody in that hall because I was new to LA. And
mm,
I saw a poster that said Transgender Day of Remembrance. I didn't know what was that. And I said, let me go. And it was about trans murder. And I stood there thinking that that could be me.
yeah.
mm, mm,
I, I was very close to being murdered in Long Beach,
Mm,
being abused in Long Beach. And I said,
gosh.
that could have been me.
mm,
And I am lucky to be alive today. And if I'm alive, there is a purpose for me to be alive. And I
Mm,
need to tell.
mm,
And that was a story that I started telling. And that is a story that made a big difference. I did
mm,
speak about my story, and I think that made a huge difference in people. I told my story about struggling to get a job.
mm,
Oh, I was looking for a job all over LA for 6 months. I didn't get a job. Those are the stories that we need to tell during the LGBTQ month.
mm,
Unfortunately, it's all about and these are the stories that needs to go into. Even if the school board says that we are not going to let anyone understand the LGBTQ bullying and issues with
mm,
are going
yeah,
through, you know what? I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to put it on social media, and the children
mm,
will talk about it.
yeah.
I think that's what we need to do during the
Mm,
LGBTQ Pride Month.
mm,
and thank you for sharing your story during this month. It's been very inspiring, like I said, and very powerful. And thank you ever so much for joining us today. We
yes.
really do appreciate it. And
Mm,
hopefully, this is the first of many conversations that we get to have with each other.
mm, mm,
Thank you,
Yeah,
Alex,
very
absolutely.
good.
for sharing.
Yeah.
No,
Appreciate
you're
It
most
was,
welcome.
it was great to have you, Celia. Thank you so much for joining us.
it. Thank you so much for having me and giving me a platform to share my story this morning. Appreciate it.
Mm,
And
Great.
evening in UK.
mm,
Yeah.
Thank you.
As we end, we just want to say we have some special news that we're now on Spotify,
Mm-hmm.
where our podcast can now be listened to, and you can also see this on YouTube at One Place East. So thank you all for listening. Thank you, Cecilia, once again. And this has been episode 8, and we'll see you next month. Take
Mm-hmm.
care.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Right?
Bye.
Bye.